So I just got done reading Chris Mellon's amazing article that published in the DeBrief today. And it made me realize that this is another glaring indication that the US government is not planning on creating this big, evil, extraterrestrial threat narrative as so many people claimed was going to happen. And I'm sure a lot of these people still believe it's going to happen. 5 years from now, they may be saying, well, it's just going to take some time. You know what? I don't have time for this kind of lack of what I consider critical thinking capacity. The Air Force apparently doesn't really want to cooperate on the UFO issue. And as I've said a million times before, if the Air Force suddenly came out of the woodworks and said, yeah, you know what, UFOs are an incredible, enormous national security threat, well, then people are going to go to jail because they are required by law to inform intelligence oversight committees within Congress. So you know what's more likely? You know what's more likely than them creating this huge threat narrative? Is downplaying any threat that's there, because there being a threat's really not in the Air Force's best interest, because there could be enormous legal repercussions if they go that route. Whether it's been current officials like the Secretary of the Air Force, Frank Kendall, or ex-officials from the Air Force, they've all been downplaying UFOs. They've all been giving UFOs a very non-threatening outlook. The very opposite of what many people were adamant was going to happen. Now, this is the problem with conspiracy theories often, is they attempt to oversimplify a very, very complex world. For example, there are people who will tell you that this rollout that's happening right now, it's all planned, it's all orchestrated, it's all tied into a neat little package. And everything that's happening with UFOs right now is happening from some small group within the US government that controls all the strings. Well, I mean, I don't think that's the case. I don't think the evidence points in that direction. The United States Air Force didn't even want to contribute to the UFO report that was released in June of 2021. So this idea that the disclosure process is completely controlled and orchestrated, the evidence doesn't seem to support that. Now, I'm not saying that there's not some influence from higher ups, but it's not in the way that a lot of conspiracy theorists are so adamant to say that it is. And I think this gets into motivated thinking. People want the truth to be a certain way because they resonate with it, right? They like it. Hey, everyone. The U.S. government's going to create a big alien threat. Let's get together and fight it. Well, you're not fighting anything because that's not the case. I'm not saying that's impossible, but the evidence 40 years later does not support that contention. It just doesn't. Reality is very complex. It's not so cut and dry. It's not so streamlined as a lot of these conspiracy theories promote. It's much different than that. There's competing factions. There's competing ideologies. Within the intelligence community, there's competing ideas on how disclosure should happen. Different military branches have different degrees of desire to cooperate on the UFO issue, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it just amazes me how many people get so enthusiastic about various conspiracy theories when really they're not very compelling. Reality is so much more complex than that. And I'm just going to say it. I know people aren't going to like it, but the whole idea that the U.S. government was going to create some big threat narrative as it pertains to UFOs, I think that was a major faceplant. At least up until now, if anything changes, okay, well, then we'll have that discussion. But it's 4 years later. And with every single day that passes, it gets further and further. No, what's happening is the United States Congress is fighting tooth and nail to get the elements that have information on the UFO issue to release it. That's what's significant. Not this hypothetical, no, That didn't work out that way. Life is much more complicated than that. This is just sort of a rant. As soon as I heard people saying that the U.S. government was going to create this threat narrative, from day one, I'm like, nah, that's unlikely. And not the least of which is because it doesn't serve the military, it doesn't serve the Air Force. There are oversight intelligence committees within the Congress that by law are supposed to be told about any threats to national security. So if one day the Air Force is like, hey everybody, guess what? We lied. Remember when we kept telling you for decades there's no national security threat to UFOs? Well, guess what? There's a huge national security threat. That just doesn't make sense. That's not that is not aligned with self-preservation of the Air Force. If the military-industrial complex wants funding for their operations, they can cite China, they can cite Russia. They don't need to cite aliens. Nonsense. And that's just my opinion, and maybe I'll end up wrong. But 4 years later, it doesn't look very compelling for the counter arguments to that. But that's all I got to say. Have a nice one. I actually originally published this on Twitter less than like an hour ago, and it's doing pretty well, so I decided to upload it on my channel. I just had to get that off my chest. It's been an ongoing pet peeve of mine, but it is what it is, and I wish you all the very best. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. You could become a patron, a YouTube member, or you could even just give me a one-time donation. All of those opportunities are in the description below, or you could just slap a like on this bad boy, and I will appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Special thanks to all patrons, YouTube members, those that have bought merch, those that have given me one-time donation. I couldn't do without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.